Welcome to Nocturne Historia. A single flame flickers in the dim attic, casting long, quivering shadows along the rafters, where dust hangs like memory. There, seated cross-legged on the floor beside a low table worn with time, a boy leans into the candlelight, his dark eyes tracing the soft edge of a map he's begun to draw on the back of an old sheet of parchment. You are with him now, though he does not see you. Outside, the wind scratches against the shutters like an impatient ghost, and far in the distance, a bell tolls. A dull, solemn note that drifts not to mark time, but to stir something in the chest. Something ancient, something waiting. The boy draws in silence, the stub of charcoal pressed between his fingers, sketching not what is, but what could be. Mountains rise where none have stood. Rivers bend toward victory. Cities glow along imagined coasts, each name penned with the gravity of someone who believes the world is still unfinished. You almost forget this isn't a memory. He is only 9 years old, yet already the air around him feels altered, as if history, watching quietly from the eaves, has chosen to lean a little closer. Born on a stubborn, wind-carved island off the French coast, this child has inherited no throne, no fortune, no divine promise. Only a name, a mother's quiet discipline, and a hunger for more. Others sleep with dolls, or stories, or fear. He sleeps with Caesar in his head, Alexander on his breath, and a stubborn fire behind his ribs. Corsica is too small, and France too distant. But on paper, under flickering light, everything is possible. The room smells of old wood and ink. Shadows spill like cloth from every corner. In the silence, you hear the scratch of charcoal, the soft huff of his breath as he concentrates. He redraws the map again, turning it slightly, not because it is wrong, but because he believes it could be better. There are no boundaries here he will not question, no borders he will not dare to erase. You realize, with a strange stillness, that this is not simply a game. This is prophecy, whispered in graphite and silence. His mother calls softly from the stairs, but he does not answer. The fire in him is louder. He remains still, transfixed by possibility, as if he can already hear the future knocking faintly beyond the candle's reach. On the page, he outlines campaigns not yet conceived, movements of troops he has never seen, the rise and fall of empires yet unbuilt. His fingers are smudged, his eyes unblinking, and though he sits in a dusty Corsican attic, he is elsewhere. In spirit, he is already moving. He envisions snow crunching beneath boots on foreign roads. He sees soldiers saluting beneath arches of smoke. He tastes the sharp air of 1,000 distant mornings. And though he does not know their names yet, Vienna, Cairo, Moscow, they call to him just the same. He does not draw as a child. He draws as someone rehearsing destiny. The flame trembles. The shadows shift, and something within you shifts too. You sense what he cannot yet, the weight of what he will carry, the myth he will build around his name, the loneliness that will press cold against his crown. But for now, he is just a boy with quiet fire in his hands and a future stitched in charcoal. His empire exists only in ink, but already it begins to breathe. That night, the silence of Brienne wraps the academy in stillness, and the snow, gentle but constant, falls over the stone courtyards like a memory trying to forget itself. You walk alongside him through the narrow gates, past the iron lamps that glow dimly in the cold, your boots leaving soft imprints on the cobbles as he, still a boy, and not yet a man, strides ahead with that same purposeful hush, as if every step were being recorded by something invisible, something eternal. His coat is oversized, his accent unfamiliar, and though the other boys scoff behind closed doors and polished uniforms, he walks as if their laughter were wind, and his mind, already fixed on something far beyond these walls, remains untouched. He speaks rarely, and when he does, his words come carefully measured, as though each syllable is a piece in a formation too strategic to waste. His real language is focus. He studies with a hunger you can feel even from across the room, geometry, artillery, history, equations, all devoured as if each lesson were a weapon to be sharpened, not a requirement to be passed. He moves through drills and lectures like a ghost with fire in its chest, and in the quiet hours of the evening, he doesn't dream of family or safety, but of formations on distant fields, of how wind affects a cannon's path, of how silence precedes a charge. You sit beside him as he hunches over books worn from too much use, his hand wrapped around a pencil the way a soldier might grip a blade. He never raises his hand to answer. He simply waits. Waits for the others to guess. Waits for their errors. And when the teacher, finally, turns to him, he replies with precision so calm it silences the entire room. Not loud, just final. The others whisper when he passes. Corsican, they say, a word heavy with contempt, like a mark they hope will bruise. But he does not reply. He does not argue. He does not give them the satisfaction of a spark. Instead, he endures, and that endurance is not passivity. It is a pressure, quiet and unrelenting, the kind of pressure that bends iron over time. Each night, as the frost creeps over the windows and the rest drift into the warmth of dreams, he remains awake beneath the thin covers, reaching into the shadows to find the map he's hidden beneath his bed. You watch him trace invisible paths over the paper, routes that cut through the Alps, flank imagined battalions, break siege lines that have not yet formed. He is still a boy in body, but in his mind, he is already in command. The map is not fantasy, it is rehearsal. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. One morning, as the bell tolls and drills begin, you find him standing alone in the snowy courtyard, his breath soft in the pale air, eyes fixed on something beyond the walls, something only he can see. And when he speaks, barely louder than the rustling branches above, it is not to you, nor to anyone in particular. It is to the future itself. What matters is what I carry beyond this. There is no pride in the statement, no drama, only a quiet understanding that the world, one day, will not measure him by where he began, but by how far he made it shift. The others return to games, to gossip, to warmth. But he remains in the cold, still thinking, still drawing lines no one else can see. And you, watching, begin to understand. This is not ambition for its own sake. It is something colder, sharper, more enduring. It is purpose, formed in silence, and fire, born in snow. The silence is heavier now. It drapes over the stone courtyard like an old cloak, worn at the edges by footsteps long gone. You walk beside him as he ascends the stone steps of the École Militaire in Paris, the capital pressing in from every side with its smoke, its salons, its sharp stares that measure worth not by knowledge or discipline, but by lineage and gold. He is neither rich nor noble. He carries no title, no soft name, no patron to speak for him. Only his notebooks. Only his fire. Paris is a different kind of cold. Not the bite of Corsican wind or alpine snow, but something colder, subtle and polished, like a laugh behind a wine glass, like a locked door that was never yours to open. And yet he walks through it unflinching. While others toast to heritage and whisper strategies at velvet banquets, he dines alone beneath gas lamps, feeding himself pages of past campaigns. He memorizes not just battles, but the weather that changed them, the boots that failed, the hesitation that doomed entire legions. He studies how empires collapse, not out of fascination, but as warning. In lectures, his hand rises rarely, but his eyes never stray. He sees each diagram, each maneuver, as a living thing, breathing, changing, pulsing with possibility. When instructors test him, he does not rush. He answers with the quiet weight of someone who has already imagined the battlefield 100 times in silence. His answers are not brilliant. They are inevitable. Others call him strange. They find his silence unnerving, his stare too still, too focused. But they do not see what you see. They do not hear what you hear, walking beside him through the candle-lit corridors at night, the way he repeats names like a litany: Hannibal, Frederick, Caesar, not heroes, rivals. He walks the length of the library, fingers trailing the shelves not for stories, but for strategies, not for comfort, but for correction. Every plan ever made, every war ever lost, he devours them all, not out of admiration, but hunger. You catch him one night, whispering in the dark, "They didn't go far enough." You pass another closed door. One afternoon, a visiting dignitary scoffs at the sharpness of his questions, his lack of polish. The room laughs, but he does not. He waits until the room falls quiet again, and then answers, not to impress, but to correct. The room is silent long after he finishes. Even pride has no reply. Still, when he returns to his chamber, he sits on the edge of the bed, shoulders hunched, not in defeat, but in thought. His fingers trace the leather spine of a worn copy of Polybius. Outside, Paris celebrates itself. Inside, he builds something in silence, something vast. Weeks pass, then months. Then his name appears at the top of the officers' list, earlier than expected, younger than most, ahead of those whose names were engraved before they could read. He will leave soon. But tonight, he lingers by the window, watching the clouds gather over the Seine. You watch with him and feel it. The stillness before motion. The quiet before the page turns. He has learned the language of conquest now, not the trumpet and drum, but the margin note, the retreat planned 2 weeks before the advance, the weight of a single hour well spent. And in that stillness, you understand. His genius is not in brilliance, but in his refusal to waste time on anything that does not move the world. He does not dream for the sake of wonder. He dreams to direct it. The silence breaks, not with words, but with thunder. You stand on a hillside above Toulon, and below you, the sea roars against the battered shore, ships drifting like broken teeth across gray waves, their masts twisted and trembling under British flags. The air tastes of salt, iron, and something new. Smoke, not from hearths, but from war. He stands beside you now, no longer the student in a borrowed coat, but a commander, barely 24, with maps rolled beneath one arm and artillery orders gripped tightly in the other. His eyes scan the city not with awe, but with calculation. The siege has dragged for months. Generals have failed. Forts have held. But now he arrives, obscure, untrusted, overlooked, and sees something others have missed. A narrow ridge above the harbor, forgotten by command, feared by soldiers, vulnerable only to someone who believes in impossible angles. He climbs it with cannon teams and silent nights, dragging fire up through mud and stone while the enemy sleeps below, unaware that the future is being hoisted toward them, one wheel at a time. The men murmur. They question his youth, his rank, his sharp, unsmiling manner. But when he speaks, the hesitation in their hands falls away. His voice is not loud, but it carries the gravity of someone who already sees the moment after victory, the silence after the final shot. You walk beside him through the trench lines as they prepare, and he speaks softly of angles, of wind, of range, of consequences. He is not guessing. He is remembering what has not yet happened. Ash drifts in the quiet. At dawn, he gives the signal. The cannons roar to life, each one a scream of rebuke, a line drawn across the bay. The British ships shudder beneath the onslaught, their rigging torn like old cloth. The defenders scramble, caught in the geometry of someone who learned war in whispers. And by nightfall, the flags shift. Toulon falls. The army cheers, but he does not. He merely watches the smoke rise, arms folded behind his back, as if awaiting a question no one else knows to ask. When the report reaches Paris, his name, previously unknown, barely spoken, is spoken too loudly to ignore. Some call it luck, others call it arrogance, but the truth, which only you see, is simpler. He found the one line no one else dared to draw. After the battle, he walks the harbor alone. You follow. Between the wreckage and the charred beams, he picks up a piece of broken mast, examines it, then tosses it back into the tide. He does not linger. He does not celebrate. Because the victory, for him, was never about the city. It was about proof. Proof that precision moves faster than power. That silence, shaped carefully, becomes cannon fire. That someone forgotten can become unforgettable, if only once. And as he steps onto the transport that will carry him away from Toulon, into the maze of war and revolution, he does not look back. You do. And you see it all, the fire, the rubble, the smoke. But he sees something else. He sees the road beyond. The fog rolls in thick over the marshlands of northern Italy, curling low along the roads like smoke from a future not yet lit. You are there, walking beside him through the stillness of early morning, the air wet with mist, the soil soft beneath your boots, and somewhere ahead, just beyond the trees, history waits again with its breath held. His uniform clings damp against his back, but he doesn't seem to feel it. He moves quickly, eyes sharp, whispering commands to aides who gallop off into the blur. Each gesture is deliberate, each pause exact, like he's conducting a piece only he can hear. The army behind him is tired, starving, disheveled, their boots worn thin, their hope thinner still. They march not for glory, but for bread. Yet they follow him, not because of gold, nor rank, nor any stirring speech. They follow because he moves like he knows where the world is bending. Today, it bends at Arcole. The Austrians hold the bridge, well defended and flanked by marshes, a trap sharpened with gunpowder and certainty. Others say it cannot be taken. He says otherwise. Not aloud. He simply points. And then, he leads. The bridge is narrow, choked with smoke, cannon fire barking from across the river. Men hesitate. They fall. The water runs dark. Bullets slice the fog like invisible knives. For a moment, everything slows, the sky churning above, the dead rising into silence, the living collapsing into mud. And then he steps forward, seizing the tricolor standard, lifting it high above the chaos as if defying the air itself. Nothing moves, not even you. But the story continues. With the flag held high and his boots sinking into the edge of the marsh, he does not shout. He does not beg. He simply walks, slowly, steadily, into the smoke, into the gunfire, into the place no one should survive. For one suspended moment, the entire army holds its breath. And then, they follow. The line surges behind him like a wave remembering the tide. The Austrians falter. The bridge groans beneath the weight of disbelief. And when the smoke clears, he is still standing. The battle is not won by might, but by defiance. Afterward, he says little. He eats alone. His hand shakes once, briefly, when no one sees. You see it. You understand that courage is not absence of fear. It is the discipline to walk forward anyway. That night, he walks the length of the bridge again. The air is still thick with the scent of gunpowder, the wood scorched and groaning beneath his step. He stops in the middle, where the water glints like dark glass on either side, and he says nothing. He simply places his hand on the rail, closes his eyes, and exhales. There are victories that crown you, and there are victories that mark you. Arcole is the latter. You look at him standing there, quiet and alone, and realize he is not gathering glory. He is gathering momentum. The silence inside the Paris chamber is not born of peace, but of tension so dense it feels carved into the walls. Velvet curtains hang still, untouched by wind, though the city outside stirs with whispers. You walk beside him now, not as a general among soldiers, but as a storm clothed in civilian silk, stepping through parlors and corridors that smell of wax and wine and fear. The revolution has devoured its makers. The Directory staggers. And in this vacuum, he moves, not with noise, but with precision. No cannons fire in these halls, but the danger here is sharper. Every gesture matters. Every silence is watched. His uniform is now a tailored coat, his medals absent, yet you can feel the weight of his presence pull at the gaze of every seated man. He does not shout. He does not charm. He does not need to. They know who he is. Some call him a sword that thinks. Others, a shadow made real. But what they agree on, what terrifies them, is that he sees further than they do, and he sees faster. And now, as the whispers of conspiracy echo through marble halls, he listens without blinking. The silence is heavier now. The coup is bloodless only on the surface. Words replace bullets. But beneath the floorboards, the power shifts like tectonic plates, and you feel it with each step. The way the room leans toward him. The way men adjust their collars when he enters. The way even furniture seems to draw breath when he speaks. When the directory collapses, it does not scream. It sighs. A sigh of inevitability. 3 consuls rise, but only one matters. He does not crown himself, yet. He simply begins to write, decrees, orders, reforms. He rewrites law the way a commander redraws a battlefield. He studies taxes the way he studied cavalry charges. He moves ministers like cavalry pieces, swiftly, unexpectedly, efficiently. Even in sleep, he dreams of logistics. You are with him late at night as he bends over candlelit maps, not of rivers and forts, but of roads, grain supply, police routes, letters of education and law. He is building something not with mortar, but with motion. He does not pause. He does not reflect. The throne does not call to him yet, because thrones are symbols, and he prefers systems. He walks the streets in disguise sometimes, they say, just to listen, just to know if the people feel it, the shift. You trail beside him through narrow alleys and past lantern-lit bakeries, where workers speak his name with the confusion of hope. He does not speak, but listens. And when he returns to his study, he writes again. Reform is not a word he uses. It is a tempo. A bell rings again, softer this time. He moves not like a man chasing power, but like someone correcting a mistake. The mistake, it seems, was France without him. And as the city folds itself around this new center of gravity, you realize he is not seizing power. He is becoming it. The sun over Egypt is unlike any other. It does not rise. It arrives. It crashes down across the dunes in silence, turning the sand into gold and the air into glass. You stand beside him on the deck of the ship as Alexandria looms in the shimmering haze ahead. The sea behind you is restless, the land before you, ancient. His eyes do not blink in the heat. They scan the shoreline like a soldier reading scripture. He has brought with him not only muskets and cannon, but architects and astronomers, linguists and biologists. This is not merely a conquest. This is an inheritance being reclaimed. To others, it looks like war. To him, it is legacy. In the cradle of pyramids and scrolls, he believes he will forge something new, something that bends east and west into one breath. The march inland begins under stars. They burn strange and bright in the desert sky, constellations unfamiliar and sacred. You walk beside him through silence and sand, past palm trees that whisper of time too vast to hold. The soldiers sweat. They suffer. The heat clings to them like punishment. But he walks steady, faster than the rest, untouched by doubt. At Giza, he stands before the pyramids, not in awe, but in conversation. He gazes up at their impossible angles and speaks quietly, not to the men behind him, but to the stone. Soldiers, he says, turning at last, from the heights of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. The battle comes, brutal and strange. The Mamluks charge like thunder with silver blades and embroidered courage. But they are no match for geometry and gunpowder. Squares form. Artillery sings. The enemy breaks like water on stone. Victory echoes through the sand, but still, he does not linger. He studies the ruins instead. He kneels by broken statues. He listens to scribes. He draws hieroglyphs into his notes. While others rest, he walks the temples, whispering the names of forgotten gods as though inviting them back into breath. He is searching for something no musket can win. An idea, a weight, a silence older than Rome. But Egypt, like all empires, resists possession. The plague creeps through the ranks. The desert rebels. The British blockade tightens like a noose. Even here, history will not be tamed. Still, he does not crumble. He calculates. He adjusts. And when the path forward closes, he does not mourn. He simply vanishes, returns to France beneath the veil of secrecy, leaving behind a land changed not by conquest, but by curiosity. You follow him up the gangplank of the ship that carries him away. The winds stir. The pyramids fade into the golden dust. He does not look back. He has taken what he came for. And though the campaign is not yet judged a failure or a triumph, it no longer matters. What matters is this: he has touched something eternal, and now he will not settle for less. Paris receives him not with parades, but with tension humming in salon corners and war rooms. The old guard whispers. The public waits. France stands brittle as old glass, glinting with reform, veined with fear. Yet into this trembling frame he steps again, not as a returning general, but as something stranger, a man shaped by sand and silence, now fluent in the language of both canon and culture. He walks among ministers who think they still hold the reins, but you see the shift, how conversation bends when he enters, how voices lower and backs straighten. He says little, but every silence around him becomes a question. Every pause, a promise. Even before the title arrives, the power already obeys him. Inside his study, the candlelight dances across maps and manuscripts. He paces slowly, always barefoot on the worn wood floor, the sound of his steps matching the rhythm of thought. His aides enter and exit like clockwork, bearing notes, reports, rumors. He digests each in a glance. The clutter of governance doesn't overwhelm him, it sharpens him. Each decree he drafts carries the same weight as a cannonball. Each law, a calculated move on a wider battlefield. Outside, the people begin to speak again. Bread arrives more consistently. Taxes grow predictable. Order returns. And with order comes longing, for strength, for clarity, for someone to name the sky again. You pass another closed door. It is in such moments, behind those closed doors, that the idea begins to take form, not whispered in vanity, but spoken as inevitability. Emperor, not king, not dictator. Something else, something older, something Roman. Still, he does not rush. He watches the chessboard. He allows others to suggest, to plead, to offer the crown like a secret wrapped in gold. And when the time comes, he accepts it not with astonishment, but with silence, as if he's only now arrived where the road always intended to lead. But tonight, before it happens, he walks with you down a long corridor lit by gas lamps. The halls are quiet. Outside, the wind stirs the River Seine. His boots make no sound on the stone, and his gaze is distant, as if even now he is measuring the ceiling of Notre Dame against something greater. He turns to you once, quietly, and says, "I do not inherit power. I construct it." And you understand. This is not a man who seeks approval. This is a man who rearranges the world so it fits inside his hand. Later, he will stand beneath the domed cathedral, robed in imperial silk, as the crown gleams in the archbishop's hands. But at the final moment, he does not bow. He takes it, and places it upon his own head, not in defiance, but in declaration, that no one gives him history. He makes it. The air inside Notre Dame is thick, not with incense, but with anticipation pressed between stone columns and whispered prayers. You stand beneath the vaulted arches, where light spills through stained glass like the breath of angels. The cathedral holds its breath. Outside, all of France waits. Inside, every step echoes louder than cannon fire. He enters without tremble. Draped in crimson and gold, his figure seems carved from prophecy itself. He does not float, nor strut. He advances, as if the stones themselves were laid centuries ago to carry his feet precisely here. A murmur ripples across the pews. The Pope stands ready. The crown rests on its silk pillow, glittering like a promise. And yet, when the moment arrives, when custom would demand he kneel, he does not. He lifts the crown himself. The silence is heavier now. With steady hands, he places it upon his own brow. The gesture is neither rebellion nor blasphemy, but something more intimate, a declaration that the past has no hold over him, that fate is no longer a script, but a tool. No trumpet sound, no thunder rolls, only a hush, long and deep. Josephine stands before him, her breath visible in the cold cathedral air. He crowns her too, gently, with eyes that see both empire and the ache that lives beneath it. Their fingers meet only for a moment, but it is enough. She bows, not as wife, but as witness. From above, the saints carved in stone watch without expression, but you feel it. Something irreversible just unfolded, not in glory, but in symmetry. The general becomes sovereign. The map becomes throne. He steps forward now, not as man, but as momentum. Each gold thread on his robes whispers of Caesars. Each gesture reflects centuries, yet reclaims them as new. Outside, the crowd surges. Paris erupts, but he hears only his own breath. That night, he does not celebrate. In his private chambers, he removes the crown with care, sets it down not like treasure, but like armor. He studies his reflection in a silver tray, not seeking beauty, but confirmation. He is not surprised. He is only further convinced. He dines in silence, the candlelight flickering against walls that now guard an emperor. His advisors offer toasts. He offers instructions. There is always more to do, more to consolidate, more to reform. You walk with him through the long hall of mirrors. He pauses before one. You look in and see not just the man, but the machinery behind him, the state, the myth maker. He turns to you, voice soft but certain. I have not reached the summit. I have only secured the climb. You nod, not because you agree, but because you know he's right. Steel glints beneath snowlight as the army assembles in silence, rows upon rows of men breathing mist into the frozen morning. You are there, standing just behind him on the ridge above Boulogne, where tents ripple in the wind like anchored sails and banners tremble with unreadable resolve. He surveys the encampment not as a parade, but as preparation. Beneath his gaze, every footstep matters, every barrel must be counted, every saddle placed just so. This is not ceremony. This is staging. He has drawn up plans for an invasion across the Channel, not just an act of war, but of choreography. Each troop movement, each flotilla, each grain shipment is a note in a symphony only he can hear fully. And while the cliffs above the sea remain quiet, the coastline on the other side, England, feels closer with every heartbeat. But even now, his eyes stray east. Austria stirs. Russia breathes. Coalitions whisper in smoky chambers, hoping once again to bind the storm they once dismissed. And like a compass pulled by unseen tides, he begins to turn, not away from Britain, but toward a threat more immediate, more foolishly brave. The invasion is postponed, not abandoned, but something larger takes shape. The world has grown smaller around him, and he has grown too large for France alone. A bell rings again, softer this time. You ride with him through forests mottled with light, through cities not yet conquered but already imagined in his stride. His tent becomes a war room, his cloak a map. He reviews troop placements with the intensity of a jeweler setting stone, his fingers dancing across terrain lines and mountain passes, correcting positions like a poet editing breath. He does not rest. He adjusts. The men march, drawn forward by something more than loyalty. They follow not only orders, but the shape of his will, the sheer force of belief emanating from a man who has already imagined the outcome and cannot fathom another. You watch him walk through campfires, stopping to touch a soldier's shoulder, to offer not praise, but presence. In this world of muskets and mud, he is not distant. He is necessary. News arrives. The Austrians have moved. He moves faster. The world tilts. Through the mist, through letters sealed with wax, through footfalls upon stone bridges and rutted roads, the empire shifts its weight. You pass through Strasbourg, then Ulm, then deeper. Victory leaves no footprints yet, but he marches as though the ground itself is learning how to carry him. At night, he walks alone between rows of sleeping tents, the stars glinting faintly above, the frost forming on canvas and boots. He pauses near a frozen stream, kneels, dips a hand into the ice-cold water, as if testing the pulse of something larger. He says nothing, but you feel it. He is not chasing Europe. He is shaping it. The morning mist hangs low over the Moravian plains, thick and slow, as though the earth itself hesitates to reveal what is about to unfold. You walk beside him near the edge of a gently rising hill, barely more than a ripple in the frozen land. Yet he calls it by a name already weighty in his mind, the Pratzen Heights. Below, the fog swallows armies. Austrian and Russian forces stir in silence, unaware that they have stepped into a theater already written. His eyes track the horizon not with hope, but with certainty. Around him, officers murmur, maps flutter, breath clouds the air. But he is calm, centered, waiting. The silence still hums. You can feel it in the soil beneath your boots. Something coiled, something about to spring. He lets the enemy move first, lets them descend into the valley with confidence swelling in their chests, believing they are forcing him back. They do not see what he sees. They do not feel what he feels rising beneath the smoke. Then, at the moment of greatest imbalance, he signals. The Grande Armée surges, not from the flanks, but from the center. His center. The very ground they assumed had collapsed now becomes the blade. Regiments emerge from mist like wraiths, bayonets flashing in sudden light. The Austrians falter. The Russians hesitate. You stand with him as the sun breaks clean through the fog. It is December 2nd, 1 year to the day since his coronation. The sky knows it. So does the world. The battlefield catches fire with motion. Cavalry wheels into thunder. Cannons flash like stormlight. But in his eyes, this is not chaos. It is alignment. He watches from horseback, motionless, like a painter whose hand has already left the canvas, knowing the final stroke was perfect. Ash drifts in the quiet. Later, as smoke clears and snow begins to fall, you walk the scorched fields with him. The wounded moan. The banners droop. The sky turns pale, as if exhaling. He says little, only stops to observe one ruined carriage half buried in the mud, a gilded Russian crest still visible through ash. He dismounts, kneels, touches the bent wheel with gloved fingers, and you hear him whisper, almost to himself, "This is the beginning of the end." But not his end. The Holy Roman Empire will fracture, Austria will bow, Europe will tremble, and this place, Austerlitz, will not merely be remembered, it will become legend. That night in his tent, he does not toast. He writes letters, orders, movements for tomorrow. He does not look back. He never looks back. And you, standing just behind him, your hands still smelling faintly of gunpowder and frost, realize that victory, for him, is not a pinnacle. It is simply another platform, from which to rise again. The corridors of Schönbrunn Palace echo with footsteps not born of royalty, but of reality redrawn. Gold leaf glistens along the vaulted ceilings. Mirrors reflect chandeliers made for emperors now displaced, and yet he walks through it all with the ease of someone who was never invited, but now owns the room. You follow close behind, the click of his heels steady on marble floors, past velvet-draped salons and portraits that now seem to bow in resignation. Austria has fallen. The ink on the treaties is still damp, but the transformation is complete. He does not linger in victory's ceremony. He studies its structure. Treaties, maps, borders dissolved and redrawn with strokes as final as cannon fire. Where once there were kingdoms, there are now departments. Where once were crowns, now only titles, reassigned, redesigned, reimagined. In the grand mirror hall, once reserved for emperors of old, he pauses, not to admire, but to correct. He calls in architects, scribes, military governors. He speaks of roads, legal codes, river trade. Empire, to him, is not costume and etiquette. It is functionality. It must move. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. That evening, he dines in a chamber once used by the Habsburgs. He eats quickly, reading correspondence between bites, his fork moving in rhythm with foreign policy. His generals wait nearby, silent until addressed. When he speaks, it is not of glory, but of grain shipments, militia recruitment, court reorganizations. Even in this palace, this symbol of ancient sovereignty, he is not seduced by ornament. He is building something else, not a kingdom, not a federation, but an organism, a living empire that functions on speed, clarity, obedience, one that moves at the pace of his mind. He signs decrees not with a flourish, but with a ticking sense of urgency. He moves on from Austria before its dust has settled, and soon other lands follow. The Confederation of the Rhine coils into being, an alliance of states not won by diplomacy, but by demonstration. Princes sign their loyalties in the shadow of Austerlitz, and old allegiances collapse beneath the promise, or the threat, of order. You ride with him from palace to fortress to ruined battlefield turned capital. He leaves nothing untouched. Each victory is only the door to the next. You watch as flags are changed, schools renamed, calendars corrected. He is not simply enforcing law, he is creating rhythm, a harmony he expects the entire continent to follow. The silence is heavier now. One night, while reviewing plans for a new canal in northern Italy, he turns to you and says without irony, "They thought I wanted a throne. I want a system." You nod, though the weight of that ambition still rings in your chest. A system made not of gears and steel, but of belief. He rides at dawn the next morning, not to war, but to inspect a road. He stops, dismounts, kneels, presses his palm to the gravel like a sculptor touching the base of a monument not yet carved. Because for him, the empire is not built only in battles, it is built in motion, and the map is not finished. Not yet. The Rhine flows slow and wide beneath an overcast sky, its waters gray with memory. You stand upon a stone bridge in silence, watching the current wind through hills once guarded by princes now forgotten, their banners replaced by tricolor flags that flap not with pride, but with precision. Behind you, the air carries the sound of hooves, of regiments shifting in calculated silence. He is coming, not in fanfare, but in formation. He rides at the head of his guard, uniform crisp, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his bicorn. The towns along the Rhine no longer resist. They adapt. Mayors bow, courtiers fumble to pronounce new edicts. The people, some hopeful, some resigned, watch as the map redraws itself on their doorsteps. And yet, He does not pause for applause. He surveys each province with the gaze of a surveyor rather than a sovereign. Roads are not just routes, they are arteries. Schools, not luxuries, they are weapons. Language, calendar, law, tools of unity, of control, of legacy. You enter a council chamber with him in Mainz, where local officials rise nervously from their chairs. He offers no pleasantries, no indulgent smiles, only questions, sharp, swift, relentless. How many days to mobilize your garrison? What is the wheat yield per canton? How many teachers can write in both French and German? The answers are not good enough. They never are. The breeze shifts. You're still there. He speaks of Rome, not of its emperors, but its efficiency, of roads that outlasted dynasties, of aqueducts that flowed long after swords had fallen. He sketches a vision not of dominion, but of function, a machine that survives its maker. He wants the Rhine not as border, but as backbone. That night, he walks the riverside alone. The moonlight stains the current in silver, and for a moment, his figure seems carved from mist. He picks up a stone from the riverbank, smooth and pale, and turns it over in his hand. Even the river forgets, he says softly, but the system must not. You look across the water. Somewhere beyond the bend lies Prussia, restless, watching. He knows they will move. He hopes they will. Because each new enemy is a chance to refine the design. In Strasbourg, you watch as his engineers draft blueprints beside his generals. They work from the same strategy. Every bridge is a flank. Every train of supplies, a front. He no longer sees land as conquest, but as canvas. He no longer thinks in days, but in decades. A candle flickers. The Rhine, once a symbol of division, is now his mirror. And in its surface, you glimpse it too. Not the man, but the empire. Not what it is, but what it will become. The ballroom sparkles, but not from joy. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across polished marble floors. Gilded walls reflect nothing but the hollow gleam of a court trained to smile while surrendering. You walk a pace behind him through the halls of Vienna, no longer a fortress of empire, but a gallery of defeat. Austria has bowed again, its elegance now a costume draped over a cracked spine. He does not strut. He glides. He knows this dance. Around him, nobles feign conversation, fans flutter, violins tremble through a waltz that no one truly hears. The air smells of perfume and pressure, like velvet stretched too thin over fear. But he is unmoved. His hand brushes the edge of a table as he passes, examining not the decor, but the angles, the symmetry, the potential use of this space were it suddenly required for a war council. He does not belong here, and yet, he owns it. You watch as ambassadors approach with smiles shaped like swords. They speak in polished tones, layer meanings beneath titles, but he hears only their concessions. Each handshake is a line redrawn, each toast, a reminder that power now wears a new face. His face. The silence is heavier now. Later, he walks alone through a side gallery, empty but for tapestries and oil portraits, dead emperors in gilded frames, staring down at him with eyes that once ruled from the very seat he now claims. He stops before one painting, a Habsburg prince mounted in regal posture, hand extended as if bestowing something. He does not look up in reverence. He looks through it and says, to no one, legitimacy is not inherited, it is demonstrated. That night, you attend the banquet held in his honor. The crystalware glows under 1,000 candles. Musicians play, servants glide between lords and ladies dressed like history has not already moved past them. He listens, smiles, responds in perfect German, corrects the Count of Reuss without a trace of insult. Yet every word he speaks is a subtle reminder. There is a new grammar now, a new rhythm, not from Vienna, from Paris. You almost forget this isn't a memory. In the quiet moments between courses, He sketches with a wine-dipped finger on the tablecloth. Lines, arcs, positions. A city, a plan, a future campaign, or perhaps only a thought. His mind never rests, even when fed. He retires early, long before the dancers do. You follow him down a quiet corridor lit by low sconces and candlelight. As he reaches his chamber, he pauses before the window and gazes into the Viennese night. The Danube winds below like a sleeping snake, and above, the stars flicker, ancient, indifferent, clear. He murmurs, "They still think this is about inheritance." Then he turns away from the night and begins writing orders. The morning fog lifts slowly from the valley near a town called Austerlitz. Again, always Austerlitz, as if even the sky remembers. But this is not that battle. This is Wagram, 4 summers later, and the land here is dry, cracked, vast. You stand with him in the golden haze of dawn, the earth already scorched by the wheels of supply wagons and the weight of approaching thunder. His eyes scan the field, not for enemies, but for timing. He has grown older, but not slower. The crown sits heavier now, but the hand beneath it still moves with precision. Austria returns to challenge him once more, and he welcomes the mistake. This time, the battlefield is not a gamble. It is a calculation. His headquarters is a tent, plain and dust-covered, surrounded by an empire on the move. Infantry stretch for miles. Artillery stands ready as if listening for his breath. You walk beside him as he circles a table, fingers skimming a map not with curiosity, but with command. Generals murmur. Aides run. He says little, but when he does, the entire room adjusts. Ash drifts in the quiet. The sun rises higher. The heat intensifies. The Austrian columns emerge beyond the ridge, columns upon columns, moving with the pride of the old world, unaware that pride is no longer sufficient. The cannon fire begins. It does not crescendo. It crushes. The field erupts in sound and smoke, a wall of thunder that ripples outward. He does not flinch. He rides through it, cloak billowing behind him like shadow given breath. Wherever he appears, the lines hold. Wherever his voice lands, the retreat halts. He does not wield panic. He absorbs it. You watch as he points to a distant hill, just barely visible through haze. A general hesitates. He speaks only once. If we take that ground, we take the day. And they do. Hour by hour, the tide bends. The Austrians recoil, not because they lack valor, but because they still believe war is theater. He has made it arithmetic. By nightfall, the fields are quiet again. Only the groans of the wounded, the clink of water cups, the shuffle of medics. The moon rises slowly, silver on blood. You walk with him among the rows of the injured. He stops at one young conscript with glassy eyes and a leg gone. The soldier tries to salute. He gently lowers the boy's arm and places a hand on his shoulder. No words are exchanged. None are needed. Back in his tent, he writes. Always writes. Reports, revisions, consequences. The victory is total, but never final. Nothing is final. Not yet. He turns to you and says, "Battles are not won on the field. They are proven there." And you understand. For him, war is not conquest. It is correction. Smoke rolls gently over the continent, not from fresh cannon fire, but from the smoldering remains of belief. You ride beside him now, not through battlefield or capital, but through village after village, each one marked not by resistance, but by resignation. The empire stretches in every direction, from the Pyrenees to the Niemen, its borders now more idea than map, and yet the farther he rides, the quieter it becomes. It is not celebration that greets him anymore. It is obedience. Banners hang, but they do not flutter. Streets fill, but no longer cheer. The empire has grown vast, too vast, and the strain hums in the air like a distant drum no one will name. He feels it. He does not ignore it. And yet, he presses on. He stops in towns with names too small to remember, speaking not to kings, but to inspectors. He asks about bread prices, road conditions, school enrollments. He adjusts taxes with the same hand that once directed artillery. He is no longer merely a general. He is a governor of motion, of logistics, of silence, stretched too thin. The silence is heavier now. You sit with him one night in a governor's palace, modest, drafty, not meant for emperors. He studies a document lit only by a single lamp. It is a list, conscripts, grain totals, disease reports. He does not sigh. He does not weep. He calculates. This is how empires end, he mutters, more to the candle than to you. Not with defeat, with exhaustion. He pushes the list aside, picks up another. War has become habit. Peace, a suspicion. Every border must be guarded, every alliance questioned. And yet, he still believes in the architecture of order. He signs decrees to reorganize Prussia's roads, sends engineers to the Alps, approves a grammar school in Venice, refuses 3 generals' requests, summons a tailor, dismisses a painter, approves a new coat of arms for Warsaw. You realize, even as the empire groans beneath its weight, he is still building. You follow him through fog-drenched woods in Saxony, through mud-clogged crossings in Bavaria. Children watch from doorways. Old men bow. Some salute. He nods to all of them, even if he does not see them, because he is thinking of Moscow. Not yet, but soon. The further east he goes, the more distant France becomes. Not in distance, but in feeling. Paris fades like a memory behind his shoulder. Ahead lies something harder, colder, vast and wild and necessary. You pass another closed door. It is not the door of a palace. It is not locked. But it is heavy. It is Russian. It is frostbitten and nailed shut with time. And soon he will knock. But not yet. Tonight he rides on. Through plains scorched by victory. Through towns rebuilt from ash. Through an empire that no longer questions him. Only wonders how much longer it can carry the crown. He does not ask the same question, because he knows the answer. He will carry it as long as the road exists, and when the road ends, he will build another. The room glows dimly under lamplight, but the map before him blazes. Red lines stretch eastward like veins pulled taut, through Poland, across the Niemen, deep into a land vast and bitter. He studies it silently, hands resting flat on the table, fingertips curled like talons over the edges of the page. Around him, marshals murmur, ministers frown, aides shift nervously, but no one dares question what is already in motion. Russia lies ahead, not as an enemy, but as a necessity. You stand behind him as he traces the path forward. He does not hesitate. He marks distances by how quickly they can be crossed, not by how deeply they can cut. He does not plan a campaign. He orchestrates a continent. The army is immense, over 500,000 souls drawn from every corner of his empire. Poles, Saxons, Italians, Dutch, Germans, French. A mosaic of uniforms stitched together by fear, glory, obligation. The Grande Armée breathes as one, trained not to ask why, only when. He names the operation not after ambition, but after inevitability. And soon they march. A bell rings again, softer this time. Through wheat fields that whisper of summer. Through forests too quiet for birds. Across bridges that bend under their weight, as if the land itself resists what it knows is coming. You ride beside him at the head of the column. He does not speak often, but when he does, it is to ask about provisions, about horseshoes, about rivers that may swell or freeze. His genius has not dulled. It has deepened into discipline. Each village they pass is a pause in history. Some open their gates. Some burn their homes. Most simply vanish into silence once the drums fade. The further east they go, the less the land responds. The air grows heavier, the faces more withdrawn. Time itself begins to stretch, days becoming mirrors of each other, as if the army walks not through territory, but through consequence. And still, he pushes on. He sleeps rarely. He eats quickly. At night, in his tent, he unfolds his maps again, adjusting them like a chess master rearranging a board mid-game. But there are signs. The land is too wide, the sky too quiet, and the enemy nowhere. He had expected resistance. Instead, he finds retreat. You ride through empty fortresses, towns abandoned mid-meal, roads salted with broken wagons and false trails. Russia does not confront him. It absorbs him. The silence still hums. Still, he rides. Still, he believes. Because belief, for him, has never been wishful. It is structural. It is the scaffolding of every campaign he has ever launched. But you see it in his eyes, just once, just briefly, as the rain begins to fall on a Lithuanian plain. A question, not voiced, not aloud, but there, a flicker. Will they turn to fight, or will the road go on forever? That night, as thunder rolls in the distance and boots sink into mud, he lights a candle with hands that do not shake, and says, "If the land will not answer, we will demand it." You do not respond, because some doors, once opened, do not close. The sun hangs low and sullen over a city that does not speak. Moscow burns, not in rage, but in refusal. You arrive alongside him, expecting flags, envoys, terms. Instead, there is only smoke. The streets are empty, the windows dark. A silence more absolute than battle fills the boulevards. The city has been offered, and withdrawn. You ride through its boulevards as ash falls like snow, covering cobblestones, statues, rooftops. The golden domes of cathedrals shimmer through the haze, but no bells ring. There are no crowds, no emissaries, no surrender. Only flame. It is not an ambush. It is abandonment. You dismount with him in the central square. The Kremlin looms ahead, half lit by fires still burning from within houses stacked with dry timber, candles left in windows. A planned ruin, a deliberate erasure. The Russian army is gone, the nobility fled. What remains is memory set aflame. He says nothing at first. He walks slowly through the smoke, eyes tracing the outlines of a city that dared deny him not by force, but by absence. Victory here is hollow, without echo. He does not plant his flag, he does not give a speech. He only watches as entire districts fall to ember and cinder. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. Later, inside the Kremlin, he sits at a desk too old for its dust, writing dispatches as if the empire will bend by paper what it will not by fire. He orders messages to the Tsar, proposes talks, outlines demands. Days pass. No reply. Only the wind through scorched rafters. Only the crunch of cinders beneath soldiers' boots. The longer he waits, the more the silence curls inwards, into the flesh of the army, into the bone of morale. Supply lines stretch thin. Horses collapse. Snow arrives, not heavy, not yet, but early, with an edge like a warning. He stands at the window one morning, frost forming along the glass, watching as chimneys cease to smoke, as carts slow, as whispers begin to rise from tents. Still, he delays. Still, he hopes, because this cannot be the end. He has come too far. This was supposed to be punctuation, not ellipsis, but Moscow offers no reply. Only cold. You almost forget this isn't a memory. When the decision finally comes, it is not made in fury nor in desperation. It is made in silence, in calculation, in the small nod he gives as he folds his map and puts it away. Not because the war is over, but because the land has refused to play its part. He rides out of the city with no parade behind him, only ash and frost and the sound of 1,000 thoughts unspoken. Moscow vanishes behind the snowfall, and somewhere ahead, retreat waits like a trap carved in ice. You look back once more, but he never does. The snow deepens like silence thickening into consequence. Each step the army takes westward is a step through mirrors, fragments of what once gleamed with certainty, now shattered beneath the boots of men grown thin, sick, and strange with hunger. You move among them as they march, not as conquerors, but as shadows of their former shape. The road from Moscow is no longer strategy. It is survival. He rides near the center, wrapped in furs, face half hidden, not to shield himself from the cold, but from the gaze of the men around him. For even now, even here, they still look to him, still expect direction, deliverance, meaning. But this snow answers to no emperor. The silence still hums. The retreat is not a single moment. It is 1,000 breaking points strung together, boots lost to frost, cannons abandoned, wolves trailing too close to campfires. Villages once meant for shelter lie burned, their roofs gone, their grain barrels shattered. He writes new orders, adjusts marching schedules, redistributes what little rations remain. But the math does not change. What was once an army has become a memory with legs. You pass a river that once flowed softly beneath a wooden bridge. Now it groans with ice, clogged with debris, splintered wagons, scorched uniforms, fallen dreams. A soldier collapses beside you. No one moves to lift him, and he watches it all, not coldly, not callously, but as one who understands now. Some battles come after the victory. At Smolensk, he gathers the remnants of command beneath a ruined archway. The wind bites through the stone. He studies their faces, drawn, hollow, desperate. Yet still, they wait for the voice that has never trembled. He gives them purpose, if not hope. "We are not finished," he says, as if to history itself. A bell rings again, softer this time. At night, inside a carriage lined with maps now blurred by snowflakes, he does not sleep. He writes letters to Paris, to Josephine, to ministers who will never feel this cold. He pens one to his son, a child too young to know the word retreat. The ink freezes on the nib. He does not complain. He endures, not because he is numb, but because the alternative is to vanish. You watch him stare into the distance, toward Vilnius, toward salvation, knowing the distance between here and there is measured not in miles, but in lives. And yet, he rides, through forests that swallow sound, through plains littered with broken standards and shattered drums, through the long echo of silence left behind by the land that would not yield. He passes men who still salute as he rides past, too cold to speak, too loyal to forget. He nods back, always. He turns once toward you and says, "They will remember I was here." And you know, he is not talking about Moscow. He is talking about this cold, this suffering, this walk through the mouth of oblivion. Because if glory is made of light, then legacy is made in shadow. The child sleeps beneath a velvet canopy in a gilded cradle, the hush of the chamber broken only by the soft rustle of curtains stirred by a spring breeze. Outside, Paris blooms in early sunlight, unaware of the quiet tension that knots the emperor's shoulders as he stands motionless by the window. You stand beside him now, watching not the child, but him. He does not smile. He watches the boy as if trying to glimpse something through him, the crown of a future not yet formed, the fragile vessel of everything he has built. They call the child King of Rome, a title forged not in soil, but in story, a symbol, a shield, a seed, and yet, for all its grandeur, The room feels small. He turns to the nursemaid, nods once, and the cradle is gently rocked. The child stirs, coos, drifts again. You can feel it, the chasm beneath this stillness. Not of failure, not yet, but of weight. Because this is not joy. This is legacy made visible. He leaves the nursery and walks the halls of the Tuileries, passing marble busts and polished guards, every corridor echoing with the footsteps of decisions already made. Ministers await. Orders pile high. Battles continue beyond these walls. But something has shifted. He is no longer alone in time. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. Later, he sits in a chamber flooded with light, reviewing dispatches. Prussia murmurs. Spain bleeds. England blockades. He reads each report as if assembling a riddle without a center. He adjusts his chair, sharpens his pen, scribbles corrections in the margins. Yet still, the thought returns. The boy. You follow him to his study that evening. He paces, writes, stops, paces again. And then, without warning, he opens a drawer and withdraws a folded letter. His own will. He reads it silently, then burns it. He does not believe in endings, only edits. You pass another closed door. Behind it, the future coos in its cradle, unaware of treaties signed and borders moved in its name. A son named for Rome, but born into an empire already beginning to tremble. He whispers once, not to you, not to the boy, but to the silence that always listens. I have given him the world. Let him learn to hold it. You feel it, how empires are no longer measured in victories, but in what survives their noise. And as the sun sets beyond Paris, casting long shadows across the nursery floor, you realize this may be the first time he is afraid. Not of war, but of being remembered wrong. The frost arrives not as a storm, but as a quiet verdict, drifting down over the returning legions like a final judgment written in white. You ride beside him once more, the once proud Grande Armée, now reduced to silence and shadows, moving slowly through the eastern roads of Europe, not in march, but in procession. They are not returning home as heroes, but as remnants, men hollowed out by cold, by distance, by a dream stretched too far and pulled too tight. He sits within his carriage, wrapped in layers not for warmth, but for protection, from the truth, from the questions that trail behind each creaking wheel and frozen hoofprint. Outside, the trees stand bare, not just of leaves, but of sound, as if the land itself is mourning, not for the dead, but for what might have been. Letters arrive by the hour. Paris grows restless, alliances fracture, and kingdoms begin to count again, emboldened by the frost now clinging to the very air he breathes. And yet, within that carriage, he does not flinch, nor does he retreat into lamentation or rage. He leans forward with ink-stained fingers and writes with urgency. New orders, proclamations, strategies to hold what remains of an empire no longer defined by its reach, but by its resilience. The world believes he is defeated. But you, seated quietly across from him, feel the pulse still beating beneath the silence, the same rhythm that once lit the bridges of Arcole and commanded the heights of Austerlitz, now quietly remapping the possible. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. He will not arrive in Paris with banners, nor songs. He will arrive before the rumors do, alone, cloaked, stepping from the shadows of failure with no apology in his voice. Because to him, loss is not the end of power. It is the recalibration of direction. The city does not cheer his return, but neither does it resist. The people, weary but waiting, look to him not for grandeur, but for certainty. He gives it in the form of movement. He meets with ministers, stabilizes coin, fortifies borders. He speaks little, but when he does, each word is stripped of ornament, refined by fire. You walk the gardens of the Tuileries with him that evening, frost brittle beneath your boots, the trees bare like confession. He pauses near a statue of Caesar, snow dusting its shoulders, and gazes at it, not with reverence, but recognition. He does not need marble to make legacy. He does not fear cracks in the stone. Turning to you, his voice low and even, he says, "I did not come this far to vanish." And you believe him, not because of triumph, but because of how he carries defeat, not as a burden, but as a blueprint. For even in winter, he is still building. The wind over the Beresina is no longer a warning. It is a wound. It whips across the frozen banks with the cruelty of something ancient and impersonal, carving hollows in the snow where men fall and are forgotten before they hit the earth. You ride beside him as he reaches the river, the ice groaning beneath his gaze, the enemy pressing close from behind like a storm not yet arrived, yet already certain. Around him, what remains of the army shivers not from fear alone, but from the betrayal of their own bodies, exhausted, starved, skeletal in silhouette. The crossing must be made. There is no time for bridges, and yet he demands them anyway. Engineers, frostbitten and numb, descend to the riverbank, hammering iron into silence, dragging timber across bone-white banks, assembling passage with fingers that can no longer feel. He oversees the construction not from the rear, but from the heart of the effort. His boots coated in snow, voice low, eyes calculating distance, weight, probability, risk. He does not speak of failure. He does not recognize it. Only delays, only variables, only time running out like light from a wounded lantern. Ash drifts in the quiet. As the first planks are laid, the Austrians close in from the rear, their cannon thunder cracking the horizon like a curse. The river beneath the ice begins to move again, its current black with broken hopes, too swift to freeze fully, too cold to forgive. And yet, the first troops begin to cross, hobbling, dragging their wounded, carrying the silence of the dead in their coats. You stand near him as the bridge creaks beneath wagons and wheels, the snow red now, the sky almost purple in its stillness. He does not blink. He commands. Units are split, survivors prioritized, the sick sheltered beneath makeshift canvas, though even he knows some won't see the next sunrise. And yet, every order is delivered with precision, as if each heartbeat were one step closer to salvation. The Austrians fire. The rear lines buckle. Chaos begins to unravel at the edges. But still, he stands firm, shouting above the cannon's cry, guiding each regiment across the skeletal bridge, not as a god of war, but as its last remaining architect. And in that moment, you see not a conqueror, but a man holding back collapse with will alone. The silence is heavier now. When the final detonation splits the second bridge in two, he does not watch it fall. He is already across, already mounting a horse, already turning eastward with the few that remain, because his gaze has always been forward, even when there is little left ahead but cold and consequence. That night, they say he slept by a fire of wet branches, his cloak pulled low, boots soaked, hands blistered from cold. You were there. You saw the way the flames cast shadows across his brow, not softening him, but revealing something harder than steel, resilience not born of belief, but of refusal. He murmured then, to no one, to the darkness beyond the firelight, "They will remember this, not the triumphs, but this." And you knew he was right, because the river did not break him, nor did the snow, nor the silence. And from the frozen edge of that ruined crossing, he carried forward not an army, but the memory of one. The gates of Paris loom like a mirage, familiar in form, yet foreign in feeling. The road home is paved with silence, not laurels, and the city that once crowned his return with thunderous cheer now greets him with caution braided into protocol. He does not arrive as victor, nor as exile, but as something in between, a man bearing the dust of thousands lost miles, his uniform darkened not by soil, but by memory. You walk beside him as he crosses the threshold of a capital straining to maintain its rhythm, its elegance, its illusion that nothing has cracked. The ministers await him in stiff formation, powdered and polished, their words wrapped in courtesies too brittle to bear the weight of what must be said. He hears them all, each syllable falling like soft snow atop a mountain already rumbling beneath. He nods. He replies. He commands. But inside, you sense it. His pulse has changed. The breeze shifts. You're still there. He no longer seeks to expand. Now, he consolidates. He reviews reports in a chamber lined with mirrors. His reflection multiplied, yet more distant now, as if even the glass begins to question the continuity of its subject. He orders reforms, reshuffles ministries, strengthens the codes he once drafted in midnight hours when Europe still bent easily beneath his pen. And all the while, the boy, his boy, grows under a crown too small and a shadow too wide. He walks with you in the gardens of St. Cloud at dusk, boots brushing frost from fallen leaves. The palace behind him flickers with candlelight. The horizon ahead thickens with storm. He pauses beneath a bare sycamore, gloved hand resting against its trunk, and says quietly, "Paris is too quiet. They're watching now, not following." You don't need to ask who they are. England sharpens its blockade. Prussia rebuilds. Austria bides its time. And in salons and back corridors, whispers gather like kindling waiting for spark. He feels it. He always has. But he does not retreat. He accelerates. He reorganizes the Imperial Guard, calls back exiled allies, writes new treaties with old hands who owe him survival. He sharpens the edges of loyalty, turns his silence into steel. He is no longer the young commander of Arcole. He is the weathered architect of an empire bound together not by victory, but by necessity. You pass another closed door. Inside, his son sleeps beneath painted ceilings that once heard Mozart, now echoing only with the weight of inheritance. He stands at that door some nights, not entering, not speaking, just listening, to breathing, to possibility, to the question that cannot be answered. Will it endure? And though his boots are back on French soil, you understand. He has not truly returned, because return implies ending, and his story still insists on motion. The island of Elba lies quiet beneath a sky streaked with salt and the gentle ache of the Mediterranean sun, too beautiful, too small, too still. Waves lap against its rocky shores with the rhythm of exile, not punishment but pause, as if history itself has placed a comma here, unsure whether to continue or concede. You walk with him now along the narrow cliff paths where olive trees lean into the wind and gulls cry above abandoned forts that once mattered to someone, somewhere. He wears no crown now, only a plain coat, worn boots, a hat shaded more by memory than by sun. Yet the men who follow him still stand straight, still move when he speaks, still address him as sire. For even here, on this island carved more from rumor than from rock, he is not a prisoner. He is a presence. In the mornings he surveys the harbors. He takes notes on the fishermen's routes, sketches proposals for irrigation, consults with engineers about quarry lines and road repairs. He studies the local dialect. He reorganizes the island's militia. Every act, no matter how small, becomes a thread in a net he continues to cast, because no matter how far from Paris, from the roar of drums and the blaze of banners, his mind does not accept stillness as truth. You pass another closed door. Inside, he writes, not letters of farewell, but plans, supply lists, secret communiques, timetables measured not in hours, but in hearts. News trickles in across the sea like water through stone. France faltering under a king not yet crowned by belief. Allies unraveling. Discontent fermenting. And somewhere in the distance, the old rhythm begins again, not of power regained, but of permission withheld too long. You see it in his walk, how he begins to trace longer paths across the island, how he speaks with fewer words, and how his eyes no longer rest on Elba's hills, but toward the horizon. One evening, as the sun bleeds gold into the Tyrrhenian Sea, he turns to you at the cliff's edge and asks, not as emperor, not as soldier, but simply as man, "Would you follow me again?" And you answer without words, because the sea is already stirring, because the sails are already being stitched, because history, once cracked, cannot be sealed. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. The wind picks up. Boots are polished. Coins exchanged. Oaths reawakened. And one night, without fanfare or farewell, he boards a small vessel moored beneath the cliffs and sets his eyes toward France. Not in rebellion, not in desperation, but in return, because exile was never absence. It was rehearsal. And now, the curtain rises again. The coast glows pale beneath the early spring sun, and as the surf breaks softly upon the French shore, so too does something greater. A name, a memory, a myth reborn. You stand beside him as he steps from the small vessel, boots pressing into the sand with the quiet weight of inevitability. The 100 days have begun, not with trumpets, not with proclamations, but with silence thick enough to echo for centuries. There are no armies waiting, no cities unlocked, only a few men, faithful, weathered, watching. Yet they salute, they follow. For though he returns with nothing but belief and a uniform faded by exile, the world feels it shift. France inhales. The monarchy, trembling behind Versailles' shuttered windows, feels the ground soften beneath them. He does not march on Paris. He draws it toward him. The silence still hums. You walk with him through villages where eyes widen, where hands grasp musket straps, not in fear, but in longing. Former soldiers appear from farms and smithies, pulling worn jackets from trunks like they were waiting for a knock that has finally come. Bakers offer bread. Blacksmiths offer horses. Mayors offer keys, not out of politics, but memory. He speaks rarely, never loudly. In each town, he stops, lifts a hand, reminds them not of duty, but of destiny. And they come. In Grenoble, they say he faced an entire regiment with nothing but his voice, stepping forward and opening his coat, saying, "If you would kill your emperor, here I am." But they did not fire. They wept. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. From Lyon to Auxerre to Fontainebleau, the line of allegiance redraws itself like water seeking its level. Word spreads faster than hoofbeats. By the time he nears Paris, it is not an army that marches behind him. It is belief given legs. He enters the city not in triumph, but with eyes narrowed in calculation. The palace is lit, the throne still warm, but he does not rest. He knows now. Rule is not about ascension. It is about timing. He sets to work that very night, gathering ministers, rewriting decrees, rallying veterans. His handwriting flows like it did in Cairo, in Vienna, in Warsaw. The burden is familiar. The walls of the Tuileries echo again with motion, but beneath it all, you feel the tremor. They are coming. Prussia, Britain, the old order reawakening, not in slumber, but in survival. He knows it, and he is not afraid. You ride with him past the edge of the capital, beneath moonlight stretched thin over fields, soon to bear footprints again. He pauses beside a willow tree, its branches brushing the earth like arms reaching for rest, and says, "This time, they will not underestimate me, but I will not underestimate them either." The wind does not answer, but history already has. The 100 days have begun, not as epilogue, but as defiance. And somewhere on the horizon, a final field waits. The drums begin again, not with flourish, but with gravity. You ride beside him now, through green hills and rain-slicked roads, the air heavy with the quiet urgency of destiny rehearsed one final time. The countryside rolls past, dotted with farms and chapels, villages still blinking from the news that he has returned. But the pace does not slow. The war that never quite ended has resumed, not in smoke, not yet, but in the sound of boots meeting mud and orders written with the finality of someone who knows there are only a few pages left. The army he assembles is not the polished grandeur of past campaigns. It is leaner, older, fueled less by ambition and more by memory. Soldiers who fought with him in Italy, in Egypt, at Austerlitz, who wear their scars like medals and follow not because they must, but because they cannot imagine marching behind any other name. He rides among them without pretense. They do not cheer. They nod. They prepare. You pass another closed door. Inside that silence, France holds its breath. Across the continent, coalitions gather like thunderclouds. Prussia sharpens its bayonets. England counts ships and wakes old commands. Austria watches, calculating. Russia stirs from distance. But here, along the road to Belgium, he focuses on the ground before him, the earth he must once more shape with will. You feel it in the rhythm of his stride, the set of his jaw, the quiet conversations beneath tent canvas that stretch into midnight. He does not expect an easy victory. He expects clarity. The name of the place begins to echo now, murmured first among scouts, then ministers, then officers folding maps along damp edges. Waterloo. He studies its ridges, its hedgerows, the long spine of terrain that will soon carry the weight of cannon and consequence. You stand beside him as he points. There, the center. There, the left flank. There, the ground that must hold no matter the cost. The breeze shifts. You're still there. The final plan begins to take form, not as thunder, but as breath. His mind moves through it like a ghost, crossing a bridge of possibilities, every maneuver mapped, every reserve calculated. He has done this before, but this time he feels the clock. In the quiet of his command tent, he does not rest. He repositions cavalry, writes messages to Ney, requests rain forecasts. He watches the sky and the mud and the slope of the land like a painter framing his final canvas. And still, there is no fear, because to him, the outcome is not the point. The act of rising, again, is the message. That night, he walks the perimeter, speaking to no one, touching the trunks of trees with the tips of his fingers, as if reading the grain of time. He pauses beneath a lone elm tree near the crest of the ridge and closes his eyes. "This ground will remember me," he says, "as much to the earth as to you." And in that moment, you understand. Waterloo will not be a battle. It will be a reckoning, a full circle, a mirror, and by morning, it will begin. The dawn breaks behind a veil of low gray cloud, casting the fields of Waterloo in a dim, uncertain light, as though even the sun hesitates to watch what is about to unfold. You stand at the edge of the ridge with him, boots damp from the dew, eyes fixed on the far horizon where movement stirs like breath behind a curtain. This is not just terrain, it is theater. Every fold of ground, every farmhouse, every line of hedgerow will soon become part of something irreversible. He moves along the front with calm precision, speaking in tones that settle rather than ignite. Soldiers look to him not for reassurance, but for rhythm. They know his presence. They remember it. They draw strength from its very shape. He carries no illusion of invincibility, but still, they would follow him into fire if he asked. And now, he does. The silence is heavier now. Across the field, the British lines stiffen under Wellington's gaze. The Prussians draw nearer from the east, each hoofbeat on the sodden ground an echo of the clock he can no longer control. Time has always bent to him. But today, time resists. The battle begins slowly, like a storm clearing its throat. Artillery roars in intervals, cannonballs carving paths through wheat and flesh alike. Infantry surges forward, then pulls back like a tide dragged by hesitation. Smoke rises and clings. The day darkens, though the sun remains above. He rides between batteries, issuing corrections, altering formations, tightening the coil. His voice cuts through chaos with the clarity of memory. You follow him as he leans down to speak to a young soldier trembling behind a broken wall. He says only, "Steady now. The line is not where you stand. It's where you stay." A candle flickers. Your breath slows. Hours blur. Ground is gained, then lost. Hougomont burns. La Haye Sainte collapses into a nest of blood and bayonets. Each order he gives feels heavier than the last, not in logic, but in consequence. He sends Ney forward, but too far. The cavalry charges. They ride bravely into fire, not knowing that the ground beneath their hooves will become legend, and then ash. Midday breaks into late afternoon. The wind shifts. The smoke opens a corridor through which he sees the distant banners of the Prussian advance. He knows it then, knows it before anyone says a word. Time has finally outpaced him. Still, he orders the guard. His old guard, iron-clad ghosts of past triumphs, march up the slope with drums like funeral beats, unwavering even as the ground eats them alive. They do not falter until the final volley cuts them down. "La garde recule!" someone cries, and with those words, the spell shatters. You watch him stand alone upon the ridge. He does not weep. He does not scream. He simply removes his glove, presses it to his lips, and exhales. The field is lost. Not to failure, but to time. Ash drifts in the quiet, and as dusk falls over the wreckage of men and mud and memory, he rides away, not in disgrace, but in silence. The sky above him bruises purple. Behind him the name Waterloo begins to carve itself into stone. But ahead, there is still breath, still motion, because even in defeat, he carries something that cannot be buried. Not yet. The road away from Waterloo is narrow and quiet, pressed between hedgerows that no longer echo with war, only with the rustle of wind and the creak of leather straps worn thin by sorrow. You travel beside him now, not with banners or trumpets, but with the weight of silence that lingers after something enormous has collapsed. His uniform bears the smoke and soil of battle, but his posture does not bend. His gaze remains fixed on the horizon, as though by moving forward, he might unwrite what lies behind. He does not speak of betrayal. He does not curse the wind or the rain or the scattered timing of arrivals. He knows the pattern too well, how fortune follows its own strange rhythm and loyalty thins when the light changes. What burdens him is not the loss. It is the knowing that the end was not taken, it was earned. Slowly, one step, one breath, one choice at a time. The road curls southward through France, and the trees begin to bloom again. Spring, indifferent, carries on. Villagers bow as he passes, unsure whether to offer bread or distance. Some do both. Children stare without understanding. They do not see the emperor, only a man riding in silence, wrapped in history. Nothing moves, not even you. But the story continues. He returns to Paris not in triumph, but in twilight. The city does not reject him, but it does not hold him tightly either. Ministers arrive. Discussions follow. Fingers point. Voices lower. The crown is still his, technically, but it rests now like a question atop the mantle of the moment. He watches from a balcony one evening, overlooking the Seine. Lanterns flicker along the banks. Lovers drift past on quiet walks. Somewhere, music plays. And he says to you, so softly you nearly miss it, "It wasn't the defeat that undid me. It was the waiting afterward." Still, he does not resist what follows. He abdicates once more, not with tears, but with ink. His signature, unshaken. His posture, unbroken. He does not need to be forced. He understands what even history must learn, that sometimes the echo fades because there is no more room to carry it. They assign him a new exile, a new boundary, not Elba, but St. Helena, a rock adrift in the Atlantic, farther from home than war had ever taken him. You watch as he boards the ship. The harbor is quiet. The sailors do not cheer. The gulls do not cry. He stands at the rail, wind tugging at his coat, and turns to you, not with sorrow, not even with bitterness, but with a calm that comes only when one has outrun everything but reflection. This time, he says, there will be no return, only remembrance. And as the sails rise and France disappears into mist, you realize the man is gone, but the myth is just beginning. The ship cuts across the Atlantic with the slow rhythm of resignation, its hull groaning softly beneath the weight of both man and myth. You stand beside him at the stern, where the sea stretches in every direction like a silence that cannot be filled, and St. Helena lies ahead, small, volcanic, forgotten. It does not beckon. It does not wait. It simply exists, a punctuation mark in the middle of nowhere. He says little during the voyage. He paces the deck in measured strides, eyes narrowing at the horizon, where clouds gather in slow spirals and salt clings to every breath. The crew speaks of him in hushed tones, not out of fear, but reverence. They know who he is. They know what he has done. And they know this is no ordinary prisoner. At night, he writes beneath a dim lantern in his small cabin, notes, memoirs, fragments of a memory too vast to condense, too vivid to silence. He writes not for pity, nor for legacy. He writes because the mind must keep moving, even when the body has nowhere left to go. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. When the island finally comes into view, it rises from the sea not like a home, but like a verdict. Jagged cliffs, wind-scoured hills, a fortress of rock surrounded by nothing but time. No court, no capital, just an outpost and the sound of waves scraping stone. You disembark with him onto a shore scattered with black volcanic sand. British officers await, not with chains, but with distance. He nods once, and they escort him inland, through thorny brush, past slopes empty of shade, to Longwood House, a pale structure weathered by sun and sea wind, its windows blinking like eyes that do not sleep. The furniture is plain, the rooms damp, the air tinged with mildew and colonial silence, but he does not complain. He studies the floorboards, the desk, the view. He adjusts. He always adjusts. Each morning he walks the same path along the ridgeline, hands clasped behind his back, coat flapping in the stiff wind. You walk behind him, watching as he speaks to no one, yet converses with something far beyond what the eye can see. He surveys the ocean not as a barrier, but as memory, stretched flat. You pass another closed door. Inside, the world continues without him. France reshapes its laws. Monarchs gather again. Maps are redrawn by men who never smelled the smoke of battle. He hears of it all through delayed letters and filtered news. He responds with ink, with the occasional smile, with the shrug of someone who knows that being forgotten is not the same as being gone. He gardens. He debates. He dictates pages at night, his words still sharp, still sculpted with the same steel that once crossed empires. But there are fewer listeners now. Only a handful of loyal companions remain, their loyalty less political now than personal. And you, still walking beside him, begin to feel it too. That strange peace which comes not from forgiveness, but from finality. He does not seek escape. He is no longer trying to return. He is building a second empire. One made of memory, etched in ink, and carried not by armies, but by time. The days begin to slow, not with reluctance but with inevitability, as if time itself has agreed to let him pass gently now, no longer pulled by conquest or clocks, but by the measured breath of one who has given everything motion could offer. You walk beside him along the wind-swept plateau of Longwood, where the grass grows coarse and the sea never stops speaking. The sky above remains open, vast, indifferent. There are no trumpets, no flags, only horizon. He wears the same coat most days, though it has faded into softness, the gold thread tarnished, the fabric thinned at the seams. And yet he still walks with his spine straight, head high, not out of pride, but discipline. He no longer commands battalions or dictates treaties. He dictates memories now. Sentence by sentence, campaign by campaign, he builds a new battlefield out of ink. In the drawing room, the table is cluttered with papers, maps, letters, half-finished manuscripts, and you watch him trace lines across the same rivers he once crossed on horseback, the same cities he once took by fire. But now, they belong not to him, not to anyone. They are shadows. The silence still hums. Each evening he takes to the garden, hands clasped behind his back, boots crunching softly on gravel. He stops beneath the same twisted tree, a tree bent forever by wind, and stares westward across the Atlantic. Some say he sees nothing, but you know better. You feel what he feels, that strange gravity of unspent words, of echoes that cannot be called back. One night, as the rain presses against the shutters and the fire burns low, he tells you a story, not of victory, but of silence, of the moment just before a charge, of the look in a young officer's eyes, of a decision made with no time, and yet all the time in the world. And when he finishes, he says nothing more. The silence stretches long, and it is enough. Ash drifts in the quiet. The household shrinks. Aides leave. Letters slow. The world begins to forget, inch by inch. France changes. The crown shifts hands again. But he watches from his island throne with no crown, no ceremony, only clarity. He falls ill, not suddenly, but like the tide, pulling back a little each day, leaving the body colder, the voice softer, the light around him dimmer. He writes less now, sleeps more, and when he wakes, he sometimes speaks in fragments, half-remembered marches, whispered names of long-dead marshals, rivers crossed long ago. You sit beside him one morning as he turns his face toward the window, light falling gently across his cheek. His voice, faint as mist, asks, "Do they still speak my name?" You answer not with words, but with presence, because even here, even now, the world still carries his shadow, and though the body fades, the shape he carved into time remains. The days blend together now, not in confusion, but in surrender, each one a soft tide retreating a little farther down the shore. You sit in the room where he sleeps, the walls yellowed with salt air, the curtains drawn to let the wind speak gently through them. Outside, the Atlantic swells and sighs, vast and eternal, brushing against the rocks of St. Helena like a memory that refuses to be erased. He lies in bed more often now, the greatcoat folded neatly nearby, unworn but never put away. His boots rest beneath the chair. His sword, once gripped in moments that shaped continents, now hangs untouched upon the wall, the leather of its scabbard cracked with time. Yet even here, even now, he does not appear diminished. He is simply still. The doctor visits daily. Papers remain on the desk, some half-written, some never begun. The ink has dried, the quill sleeps, and yet, when his eyes open, they still carry that deep, blue storm, the same eyes that once saw Europe's crowns as mere stepping stones. Now they see something else entirely, the final contour of a life made not of peace, but of purpose. You pass another closed door, and inside it, more than his breath, more than his memory, resides a stillness that does not belong to kings or generals, but to endings that understand they must arrive unannounced. He dreams often now. You sit by the window and listen as he speaks in sleep. names whispered like wind: Josephine, Lan, Eugène, Elba, Marengo. The names drift from his mouth like petals, soft, scattered, unfinished. Sometimes his hand lifts as if to issue one last command, but it falls again gently into the linen. He speaks to you one evening, barely above a whisper. They will not understand what I was. And then, with the trace of a smile, he adds, but they will remember. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. Outside, the wind rises, and a storm forms far beyond the reach of the lantern's light. You stand by his bedside as he sleeps, the pulse beneath his wrist weakening like a song fading from a room where no one remains to sing it. The walls hum with silence. The house breathes slower. The servants speak less. Even the floorboards seem to step more carefully. On the final morning, the sky is the color of soft pewter, the ocean shrouded in pale mist. You open the shutters just a little, and the light falls across his face, still, pale, regal in its repose. His breath grows shallow, then shallower still, and in the last hour, he turns his face slightly toward the window, not toward France, not toward Rome, but toward light. And when it ends, it does not crash. It does not cry. It simply exhales. And in that breath, an empire closes its eyes. The news crosses the sea not with shock, but with weight, a weight that spreads across Europe like a cloud refusing to lift. It reaches Paris in silence. It reaches London with restraint. It reaches Vienna, St. Petersburg, Berlin, not as a cry of victory, but as something quieter, a tremor, a whisper. He is gone. You stand on the deck of a ship once again, not sailing toward war or exile, but toward return. The coffin rests beneath a canopy of black crepe, draped in the colors of a country that once crowned him, then cast him away, and now, belatedly, accepts his shadow back. Cannons fire, not in anger, but in tribute. The sea parts as if in deference, and gulls trail in silence above. He is coming home. The silence is heavier now. Paris awaits, wearing mourning like a borrowed coat, stiff, solemn, and too small for the grief it has yet to understand. Along the boulevards they gather, old veterans with sunken eyes, children holding portraits they cannot pronounce, widows who remember only the echo of boots in the street. The procession moves like a memory down the Seine, slow, majestic, final. You follow through the streets once shaped by his voice, past monuments that bear his initials, past buildings that remember his stride. The air hangs heavy with words unsaid. The bells toll. The drums murmur. The horses step with reverence. The coffin is lowered into the crypt beneath Les Invalides, a tomb carved not of marble alone, but of myth, of legend, of longing. And there, beneath the golden dome, beneath the painted ceilings and the echoing silence of France's breath held tight, he is placed, not in a corner, not in shadow, but at the very center. A bell rings again, softer this time. He rests now not beneath the sky of battle, but beneath painted angels and stone generals. His sarcophagus is vast, a vessel carved to hold more than a man. It must hold contradiction, triumph, tragedy. It must carry the silence left behind by thousands. It must house the echo of the boy who once traced borders on a map by candlelight, who once whispered empire like it was a promise to the stars. You step back. The crowd departs. The crypt quiets. And in that stillness, you hear it. Not sound, but sensation. The lingering presence of motion that never truly ends. He lies there now. Yes. But part of him never stopped walking. He walks still in the pages of school books, in statues cast in bronze, in speeches stitched from memory. He walks in the eyes of those who lead, who dare, who risk. He walks in you. And though the coffin is closed, the march goes on, not toward conquest, not toward glory, but toward remembrance. Time passes, as it always does, not with a trumpet, but a breath, slow, steady, unannounced. The years gather like dust in corners where once voices rang. The world reshapes itself, war after war, border after border. But always, somewhere in its pulse, he lingers. Not in power, not in law, but in the quiet gravity of legacy. You walk now through museums and halls where his image stands framed in oil and shadow, hand tucked into coat, gaze cast toward horizons that no longer wait. Tourists pass beneath his portraits. Schoolchildren listen to stories stitched from contradiction. Some see a tyrant. Some see a savior. Some simply see a man who made the world flinch and shift. And yet none can look away. The silence still hums. On islands far from France, on battlefields overgrown with wildflowers, on old flags tucked into dusty drawers, his name is whispered not with reverence nor with condemnation, but with curiosity. For who was he, really? The man who rewrote Europe with a gloved hand and measured breath? The dreamer in Corsica's attic? The architect of empire? The shadow cast across 2 centuries? You return to the dome at Les Invalides. The air inside remains still. Light filters down through stained glass, soft and golden, as though heaven itself pauses before touching the marble. His sarcophagus rests as it did, unchanged, vast, silent. You trace your hand along the railing, eyes lowering to the inscription, simple, absolute, unsparing. His body lies in state, but the story lives elsewhere. Ash drifts in the quiet. You wander through the long corridors of the world, and he follows, not in sound, but in weight. Every coronation bears his outline. Every law reshaped echoes his hand. Every leader who walks too quickly or dreams too loudly does so in a shadow that once stood alone on a wind-lashed cliff and said, "I will go farther." And still, there are places untouched, quiet corners where his name means little, where history has passed him by. But even there, even in silence, a shape remains. Because legacy is not what one leaves behind. It is what refuses to leave. You almost forget this isn't a memory. A boy in a schoolroom opens a book and sees a map drawn by fire. A general stands in a rainstorm and remembers a name whispered by strategy. A writer pens a line, his line, because truth, like thunder, does not ask permission. He is gone, but not vanished, buried, but not beneath us. He walks still, where the world dares to change, where silence waits to be broken. The years unfold into centuries, and still the figure stands, etched not only in marble and ink, but in imagination. You walk through time now, not with boots on soil, but with thought drawn across eras that whisper his name like a question, like a song that refuses to fade. In every age that comes after, in every threshold where order and ambition meet, his shadow flickers just beyond the firelight. He is studied in schools, debated in parliaments, adapted into theaters of war and film and philosophy. His uniform changes shape. His words are trimmed, misquoted, repeated. But the core, unchanged. A man who believed the world was moldable, that law could march as swiftly as armies, that greatness was a craft, not a crown. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. In London, they read him with suspicion. In Vienna, with caution. In Paris, with contradiction. Some with pride, some with exhaustion. But across all borders, he becomes a kind of measure, a weight against which power is quietly compared. His rise is studied, his fall cautioned, his will envied, his silence feared. You stand one day beside a statue in stone, the bicorn low, the hand tucked still, the gaze fixed on some invisible frontier. A child looks up at it, eyes wide, asks softly, "Was he a hero?" And the parent replies, he was more than that. He was history moving. Because that is what he became, not just an emperor, but a motion. And in that motion, something is always stirred. A people, a cause, a contradiction. You pass another closed door, and inside, in dusty libraries and unopened letters, he waits. Not to return, but to be returned to. His exile is studied as caution, his campaigns as genius. His love affairs, letters, reforms, ambitions, all stacked and restacked by hands decades unborn. No version satisfies. Every retelling adds another mirror. And yet, through it all, the image holds. He walks beside revolutions that whisper his name not for monarchy, but for momentum. He stands near generals who do not know they carry his echo in their stride. He hums in the minds of leaders who taste power and wonder if it is ever truly enough. The breeze shifts. You're still there. And you realize this is no longer his story. It is ours. The story of belief born in exile, of maps rewritten from memory, of footsteps that carried not just armies, but centuries. He is a statue. He is a myth. He is a silence that reshaped the world. And though no breath remains in his body, his presence lives wherever men dare to dream aloud. The letters lie folded in a box, worn soft at the corners, ink faded by time and sea air, sealed once with wax that no longer holds. You sit with them now, laid open like wounds on a desk that once heard the scratch of his pen. These are not proclamations, not orders, not the declarations of an emperor. These are fragments of the man behind the silhouette. To his son, words carried across exile. Words of legacy wrapped in regret, of dreams passed like torches to a child who may never light them. You read them slowly, each line trembling with longing. A man who once moved armies, now clinging only to language, as if his thoughts might build bridges where distance would not allow feet. He calls him L'Aiglon, the little eagle, not with diminishment, but with hope. He sees in the boy a second beginning, a clean sheet upon which history might write differently. But you know the world does not grant such clean pages. His son will never rule. He will inherit the shadow, but not the light. The silence still hums. Other letters rest beneath. To Josephine, laced with gentleness the battlefield never saw. To his mother, stiff with pride and the ache of needing it returned. To generals, filled with precision even in affection. Each envelope bears a different handprint of the same man. Strategist, lover, exile, father. You run your fingers over a sentence half erased by age. I was born when I chose to be remembered. And you understand. This, too, was a campaign. To outlive erasure. To be read again. He may have died on an island surrounded by wind and irrelevance, but in these letters, he moves again. You hear it in the cadence of instruction, the careful balance of apology and command, the ambition smuggled even into affection. He does not know how to speak without shaping. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. You carry them to the window, where sunlight spills across the pages like forgiveness. The garden outside is quiet. A breeze lifts the curtains, and for a moment you imagine him there, seated, writing, not with empire in mind, but with memory. Because words are the last weapon, and memory the last battlefield. The letters are not artifacts. They are bridges between what was lived and what might be understood. You close the lid gently, not to conceal them, but to preserve their silence. And as you do, you feel something stir, not grief, not reverence, but presence. He is not in the marble, not in the crown. He is here, on the page, in the breath between sentences, in the waiting between whispers. And somewhere, across time, the little eagle flies. Not through air, but through echo. You walk alone through a corridor where silence hangs like old velvet, thick and watchful, the kind of quiet that waits for meaning to be remembered. Along the walls, portraits gaze down, not just of him, but of those who stood near him, behind him, against him. Marshals cast in oil, queens in gauze, diplomats in shadow. Their eyes follow you, or perhaps follow the shape of his name, which still lingers in these halls like smoke in brocade. At the end of the corridor, a glass case. Inside, a hat. Not a crown, not a sword, just the black bicorn, the brim worn soft from sun and wind and command. It sits without ceremony, but its presence speaks louder than the flags that once followed it. A single hat, yet somehow it carries marches, winters, coronations, retreats, and dreams. You stand before it, breath held, because there it is, him, not in flesh, but in suggestion. The silence is heavier now. Elsewhere, a small gray coat behind another pane of glass. You picture it not on a mannequin, but flaring behind him on horseback as he crests a ridge above Austerlitz. You see it soaked in rain along a Belgian road. You see it folded neatly in exile, beside a pen, beside a thought never finished. These objects are not relics. They are sentences without endings. And you are the one meant to finish them. You move onward, into galleries filled with maps, letters, medals, diagrams of battles carved into marble, gilded furniture from palaces that no longer echo with state secrets, all of it curated, arranged, preserved, but none of it still. It hums, because he is not still. Not really. You almost forget this isn't a memory. A tour group passes behind you, murmuring in languages he once ordered from afar. Someone reads a plaque. Someone else glances at their phone. But you remain, frozen between glass and time, hearing something beneath the surface of it all. A drumbeat far away, a bootstep on gravel, a whisper that once declared, "If I had to begin again." You realize that his myth is not held in artifacts or archives. It is held in the spaces between them, in the way we still wonder what he would do, in the way we still fear what he did. A bell rings again, softer this time. And so, the museum becomes not a monument, but a theater, a stage set for reenactments that occur not in uniforms, but in decisions, not in battles, but in beliefs, because power like his does not sleep. It recasts itself, rewrites itself, rises again where ambition dares. And somewhere, even now, another young man stares at a map, draws a line, and hears his name in the thunder that follows. The world no longer speaks his name with urgency, yet somehow it still pauses when it's spoken, as though even now, long after his bones have folded into the earth, the sound of Napoleon ripples outward, stirring something under the surface of history. You walk beneath old archways where no banners fly, through cities he once entered with fire and applause, and though the crowds are gone, you feel him, in the angles of the stone, in the echo between footsteps, in the absence where certainty once stood. Not as emperor now, not as general, but as symbol. He has become something else entirely, a mirror held up to ambition, to failure, to consequence. His name no longer commands battalions, but it commands attention, a force not of flesh, but of myth. And myth, you've come to understand, does not die. It reshapes. The breeze shifts. You're still there. In a classroom far from Corsica, a teacher traces the outline of a battle on a chalkboard. In a film flickering in a darkened room, an actor lifts a hand in salute, chin angled like the portraits. In a quiet debate over power, someone says, "Napoleon tried that once," and the room stills, not in reverence, but in recognition. He is now a language, a word for greatness unmeasured, for the dangers of genius unchecked, for how one life can stretch across millions and leave no corner untouched. You see it in the monuments that bear no names, yet mimic his arches, in the uniforms that echo his lines, in the ideas passed from cabinet to battlefield to cafe, muttered under breath, ideas of legacy, of control, of transformation. And through it all, you follow, not his body, which lies still beneath domes and marble, but his wake. Because even the sea, long after a ship has passed, still churns with its passing. Ash drifts in the quiet. Sometimes you wonder what he would say now, in this world shaped by his shadow. Would he recognize it? Would he laugh? Would he try again? But then you remember, he has no need to return. He is already here, threaded through thought, through strategy, through cautionary tales and bold beginnings. You sit one night by a fire, the sky wide and inked with stars, and you find yourself whispering not to him, but because of him, some unformed idea, some plan just beginning to take shape. And in that whisper, he lives, not as the man, not as the myth, but as the moment ambition opens its eyes and asks, "What if I could go farther?" You walk now not in France, not in Corsica, not on the scorched fields of Austerlitz or the mist-veiled coast of St. Helena, but somewhere in between, all those places layered like glass in the mind, overlaid with the same image, the same presence, recurring not as flesh, but as rhythm, as if every footstep taken through history's long corridors must at some point fall where his once did. The wind moves differently here, not with purpose, but with memory, and the silence that accompanies you is not empty, it is full of him. You begin to see it everywhere, not his portrait, not his name, but the curve of ambition that follows architects, engineers, generals, poets, presidents, those who dare to shape the world rather than simply move through it. You see him in grand avenues drawn through ancient towns, in government buildings whose ceilings rise like temples, in the strategies that unfold behind polished desks, whispered not with fear, but with calculation, some echo of him at work. And what you understand now is that Napoleon no longer needs to speak. He is the silence others listen to before they speak themselves. You pass another closed door. In old war rooms left abandoned, you feel him in the dust. In train stations, in battle plans reinterpreted, in flags stitched with new hopes but old bones, you feel the shape of him behind decisions that have nothing to do with France and everything to do with legacy. He is the ghost not of empire, but of possibility. And possibility, once awakened, does not sleep again. In cities he never touched, children still study his maps. In countries he never invaded, thinkers still reference his governance. Even revolutions that defy monarchies quote his logic. And somewhere, always somewhere, a young mind stares too long at a globe and begins to dream in strategies rather than sentences. The silence is heavier now. He is not immortal. No, his body proved that. His breath, too, ran out. But what he reached for, that impulse to shape the very narrative of nations, to live inside the bloodstream of time, that cannot be buried. Because history is not a grave. It is a stage, and he was its most complicated actor. You realize then, gently, that remembering him is not about agreeing with him. It is not about celebration or condemnation. It is about acknowledgement that such a life existed, that it carved a valley so deep into the slope of the world that we still walk its edge. You stand beside that edge now, listening. No drums, no anthem, only breath. And you know this much. He left more than footprints. He left momentum. And momentum, once set in motion, is very hard to stop. Now the story no longer belongs to him alone. It has passed, as all stories do, into the hands of those who did not witness it, into the hands of strangers, of children, of scholars turning pages in silence, of filmmakers rearranging moments like actors on a stage, of poets whispering through the lens of regret and glory, unsure whether to mourn or marvel. You walk among them, those keepers of echo, those bearers of fragments, and you understand that the shape of him is no longer fixed, but fluid, bending to the need of the century that recalls him. And yet still he walks beside you, Not in the gold-threaded coat, not in the crown taken with both hands, but in the hush that comes before a decision too large for comfort. He is the breath leaders hold before command. He is the hesitation behind ambition. He is the flicker of memory in the mind of anyone who dares ask the world to change because they stood upon it. The silence still hums. In a small room somewhere, a student copies dates into a notebook. They write Napoleon Bonaparte, 1769 to 1821, and pause, just a moment too long, sensing something between those numbers, some vibration of what it means to rise too high, to fall too far, to live with a fire that does not cool until history itself must carry the ashes. And elsewhere, on a street that was once a battlefield, lovers walk arm in arm. They know nothing of Eylau, of Borodino, of Ulm, but the stones beneath their feet remember, and the air remembers. And sometimes, unknowingly, they repeat his steps, because legacy does not ask permission. It only asks space. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. You reach a quiet room, dim, timeless. A single map hangs on the wall, old and cracked. The ink bled outward like memory. It shows Europe not as it is, but as it once was, with lines drawn too straight, too clean, too confident. You trace them with your finger and think of how maps can lie, or worse, how they can dream. And he, above all, was a dreamer with a compass. Outside, the night deepens. Somewhere, far from here, a monument crumbles slightly in the rain. Somewhere else, a speech quotes him without citation. In another place, a child names their toy soldier Napoleon without knowing why. And the story, like a tide, continues. Not forward, not backward, but outward. Ash drifts in the quiet. And as you sit there, not in victory, not in defeat, but in stillness, the question that began this long road returns. Not about battles, not about power, but about presence. What remains of a man who tried to hold the world? You look up from the map. The ink has faded. The lines are gone. But the space is still warm. Now the narrative returns, not to the beginning, but to the silence before it began. The hush of breath beneath the crown. The boy in Corsica staring not at the sea, but into something far more vast. The blank space of destiny, yet written. And you realize you've never truly left him. Through every corridor of conquest and every dim-lit exile, through every whispered name and echoed footfall, he has been beside you, not as emperor or legend, but as question. What does it mean to shape the world with your will alone? In this final hour, you return once more to that flame-lit chamber from long ago. Not the throne room, not the battlefield, but the quiet place where it all first stirred. The attic of a child who drew maps in candlelight, his fingers stained with ink, his mind reaching beyond the wooden beams of his house toward crowns, toward continents, toward immortality. You stand beside him now. He does not see you, but he feels the pull of something immense. The breeze shifts. You're still there. And that child, so far from thrones and tombs, listens not for applause, but for meaning. He dreams not of conquest, but of motion. And in that dream, everything begins. You trace your hand across the symbols that have followed him, the torch that burned in every darkened corridor of his mind, the lion's pelt cast over shoulders not yet bowed by exile, the bell that tolled not only for crowning, but for warning, and the map, always the map, creased, faded, clutched like scripture. These symbols were not ornaments. They were compass points, guiding him through a world too vast to command, and yet small enough to imagine held in one mind. A bell rings again, softer this time. You descend now into the stillest part of memory. There is no more to conquer, no more to defend. Only the breath left behind by one who tried to move the immovable. You remember that his name was shouted in thunder, whispered in fear, and carved into marble not because he ruled, but because he dared. And now, he rests. Not in war, not in glory, but in story. And you, having walked every step behind him, understand this. The empire was not the land. It was the echo. Nothing moves. Not even you. But the story continues. You step now into the hush after empire, not the silence of absence, but the stillness of breath held at the edge of understanding, as though the world itself waits to exhale. The sky is darker here, not storm dark, but deep, velvety, twilight dark, like the fold between dream and waking. It is in this dim hour, with the bells behind you and the pages turned, that you begin to feel the weight of all that has passed, not as burden, but as gravity. And gravity is what he always understood best. Not the kind that pulls you downward, but the kind that draws everything toward a center. The kind that makes a man believe he can place himself at the heart of the world and bend it, not through chaos, but through precision. You feel it in the way cities were redesigned to move like clockwork around a central point, in the way armies converged like a storm onto an exact hour, an exact hill, in the way he lived, not randomly, but as if life itself could be engineered. The silence still hums. You return again to the map, this time not in marble, but in memory. You see the rivers crossed and recrossed, the frontiers declared and erased, the names of cities that once burned under banners now folded into textbooks. But he did not chase war for its own sake. What he chased was structure, order, the alignment of vision and reality. To him, history was not written, it was calculated. You pause at that realization. Because if history can be calculated, can it also be rewritten? Perhaps that is what he feared most, fading not as a man, but as a miscalculation. And so he worked to seal his name into the world's framework. Laws, roads, institutions, ideas, because marble cracks, but systems endure. His body returned to Paris, yes, but the real return was not physical. It was the return of a blueprint, a way to see the world as manageable, conquerable, legible. You almost forget this isn't a memory. And yet, no system holds forever. Even now the world frays at its edges. Borders shift. Empires fall. New maps are drawn by new hands. But somewhere deep in the bones of bureaucracy, in the structure of civil codes and the shapes of capitals, his shadow remains. Long, soft, patient. He no longer speaks. He no longer moves. But the world still moves along lines he once drew. You walk through one final corridor, stone beneath your feet, cool air pressing close, and at the end is not a statue, not a tomb, not a portrait, but a mirror. And in it, your reflection waits. Because this story was never just about him. It was about the impulse to shape, to matter, to be more than breath. Ash drifts in the quiet. And in that drifting, you understand. Napoleon is not a name. He is a question. What will you do with the world? ChatGPT Danai, Section 42, V2. The night deepens, and the prose lengthens with it, sentences stretching like shadows across the ruins of empires, until only reflection remains. There comes a moment in every long dream where the thread slackens, not in meaning, but in urgency, as though the story itself has grown weary of its own weight, or perhaps content with what it has revealed. And so you walk now more slowly, not because the path is unclear, but because each step feels heavier with remembrance. The air is thick with what has passed. The echoes no longer ring sharply, but fall softly, like dust from tapestries long undisturbed. He is no longer walking beside you. Not exactly. But you feel him in the turn of each corridor, in the pull of each thought toward something larger than the self. He has become atmosphere. You find yourself returning once more to that boy in Corsica, not to reawaken the legend, but to understand the origin. Not the boy as emperor in waiting, not as prodigy of fire, but simply a boy who stood on a balcony beneath the salt wind, watching ships sail toward destinies he could not name, and wondering, not how to become great, but how to escape smallness. And is that not the origin of all greatness? You pass another closed door. He feared obscurity more than death. He once said so, with the clarity of a man who knew the world would try to forget him the moment it no longer feared him. So he built not just an empire, but a mythology. He crafted symbols like weapons, bees, laurels, eagles, maps, each one meant to outlive him, to colonize memory long after land was lost. And in some ways, it worked. In cafes, they still argue his intentions. In books, his battles are footnoted and revised, but never erased. In courtrooms, his codes are cited. In dreams, his silhouette returns, always alone, always upright, always in motion. Because movement, above all, was his language. The silence is heavier now. You pause in a long, high-ceilinged room, lit only by shafts of moonlight breaking through old glass. The room is empty, but you sense the presence of thought still coiled in its corners. Perhaps he stood here once. Perhaps he didn't. It no longer matters. Because you realize that greatness is not defined by where you stood, but by the shadow you cast. And his was never cast by light, but by imagination. And imagination, unlike monuments, never crumbles. You move to the window. Below, the city is quiet. The Seine glimmers like a wound healed but never forgotten. Somewhere, a bell tolls the hour. You count the strikes. Not to mark time, but to measure distance. Between then and now. Between who he was and who we have made him. Because that distance, however wide, is bridged each time we ask, was it worth it? A candle flickers. Your breath slows. And the answer is never singular. He reformed laws. He buried sons. He crowned himself. He abandoned allies. He inspired millions. He led them into death. He wrote the future in strokes of genius and arrogance, clarity and cruelty. And in that impossible braid of contradiction, we find ourselves. Because no man is wholly conqueror or hero or tyrant. He was all. And in remembering him, we remember the fullness of what one human being can become, if unleashed. You close your eyes. The dream does not end, but it dims. And in that dimming, he stands not as emperor, but as mirror. And now, as you pass through the final folds of this long dream, the world begins to soften around the edges, as if the very architecture of history is exhaling, its corners rounding, its walls receding into dusk. You are no longer walking through rooms or memories, not even through maps or monuments, but through meaning itself. The afterimage of a life so large it continues to cast questions across centuries. His story has become a shoreline. The further you drift from it, the more clearly you see its shape. You no longer follow Napoleon the man, nor Napoleon the myth, but something more ephemeral, Napoleon the consequence. Every empire that rises studies him. Every revolution that stirs warns against him. Every ambition that dares to grow too large remembers the weight of his silence. He has become the scale against which all boldness is quietly measured. Not for imitation, not even for admiration, but for calibration. You pass another closed door, and you begin to wonder, how much of him was real? Not the flesh or the facts, but the idea of him. The mythology forged not by victories, but by the minds of those who came after. For even as the man grew smaller in stature, the shadow he cast only widened. You remember that he was called a god by some, a demon by others. But neither word captures the truth. He was simply human, and that, perhaps, is what frightens us most. Because if he could rise that far, fall that hard, and still live on in the margins of our laws and language, what does that say about the rest of us? The silence is heavier now. You step out into the air, cool and open. The night has deepened into full quiet. No banners fly, no drums sound. The dome of Les Invalides stands behind you like the ending of a sentence too long to read in one sitting. You turn once, just once, and look back. The light in the windows is gone, but the warmth remains, and you understand, finally, that remembrance does not depend on perfection. It depends on presence, and he, imperfect, immense, impossible, remains, in the way children still recite his name with awe, in the way generals still quote him, in the way dreamers still believe, however foolishly, that one will can move a continent. Ash drifts in the quiet. The dream begins to dim, not from lack of meaning, but from fullness, like a candle that has burned all the way down, not extinguished by wind, but completed by its own purpose. You take one last breath, slow and steady. You do not need to see him anymore, because you carry the echo, and in that echo, he walks on. You arrive now at the end, not of the story, but of its telling. The journey has curled back on itself like the arc of a falling star, and the world around you is no longer the empire of maps and battles, but something far quieter, interior, reflective, shaped more by breath than by borders. You are standing inside the memory of memory, where time bends gently inward, and everything you've seen begins to glow with a different kind of light. There is the torch, no longer raised to light a path forward, but laid softly on the earth, its flame smaller now but steady, warm. Not the blaze of revolution, but the ember of understanding. A fire that invites, not commands. There is the lion pelt, worn thin at the edges, folded not across shoulders but over stone, a garment now more symbolic than martial. The strength it once promised has softened into something more enduring. Resilience, yes, but also humility. And there, in the distance, you hear it. The bell. Not rung in ceremony, not tolled for coronation, not struck in defiance, but humming, gently, once more. A bell rung for memory. A bell rings again, softer this time, and at your feet the map returns. Not the vast parchment of ambition, not the imperial gridwork of conquest, but something smaller, more personal. A sketch, perhaps, drawn again in candlelight. The coastlines are blurred, the borders undefined. But you see in its center something you hadn't noticed before. A question mark, etched faintly, exactly where he began. Because in the end, it was never just about the lands he held or the wars he waged, but the why that pulsed beneath it all. The need to shape, to define, to matter. And now, as your eyes close, you no longer ask what he conquered. You ask what he searched for. Nothing moves, not even you. But the story continues. You breathe in, slowly, not as emperor, not as chronicler, but as witness. You were there. At the firelight of Brienne, in the thunder of Marengo, in the silence of Elba, at the end of Austerlitz, and at the edge of exile. And through it all, one truth remains. He was not born a myth. He built one, and it is still building. You've walked through empires tonight, not as soldier, not as sovereign, but as shadow. The storm has passed, the bells have faded, the torches have burned down to embers, and now, in the deep hush that follows, you find yourself back where the journey began, not in a palace, not on a battlefield, but in stillness. You are no longer tracing maps, you are floating above them. Napoleon sleeps beneath the golden dome, but that is not where he lives. He lives in symbols, in systems, in silence. And here, at the close of this long dream, you let it all go. The weight of ambition, the thunder of footsteps, the echo of names. You leave behind the marble and medals. You return instead to the boy beneath candlelight, drawing futures he could barely name. And with each breath, your own world softens. Each heartbeat a little slower, each thought a little fainter, each whisper drawn further into stillness. Because history is not only what happened, it's what we carry forward, gently. And now, you don't have to carry anything at all. You may return, or you may remain. But if you choose to rest, know that the story will wait. The map folds, the bell hushes, the last torch dims, and you are free to sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.